Pedro Torres, as it's currently the delivery manager at Leiria. But previously Torres worked on Sky in London, and he's going to share the experience of using pair programming on Sky. Please welcome Pedro.
Acho que se você puder falar em português com uma introdução, bem-vindos à Talk Pair Programming. E pronto, agora falamos em inglês. So, hi everyone, welcome to the Talk Pair Programming. So, first of all, who am I? Like João said, I already told you, so my name is Pedro Torres. And I consider myself an Agile geek. So, I kind of have a couple of certifications because I'm really interested in this area, mainly Scrum. Today I'm a trainer at Scofu and I'm a delivery manager at Blip. And I already have the pleasure to work with these companies throughout my career. Well, first of all, I'm going to show you a video. Let me see if I can actually put some sound on this. Let's try that in a bit. And just for you to think if what I'm about to show you is pair programming. So this is from a popular TV show, by the way. So this is an NCIS, okay? So quite popular in the United States. It's been broadcasted here in Portugal TV. So then the magic starts, okay? So we have two guys working on the same keyboard. Okay? But really, I don't know if they are trying to pretend they are being attacked or something like that. The main point here is actually two guys working on the same keyboard, pretending to do something useful. And then everything gets solved by magic. Because somehow. Okay, so the guy pulled the plug and basically suddenly the attack just got away. Okay, so this is not pair programming for sure. Okay, forget about this. Let's just have a little bit of background. Okay. So pair programming is a practice that is highly recommended by extreme programming. Okay, I think we are all more or less familiar with extreme programming. Okay, so it's a really useful tool to develop software, just like Scrum. But the big difference is that actually extreme programming recommends a couple of practices in order for you to succeed. And I'm guessing that I would say the majority of you already know some of them. Like, for instance, test-driven development or continuous integration, refactoring, or even the one that I'm speaking today, pair programming. Okay, so extreme programming recommends you to do all this stuff that you see. So what is pair programming? Pair programming, by definition, is nothing more, nothing less than just two developers on one workstation working on the same task. Simple. So you have two guys instead of one on the same workstation working on the same task. One of the guys, we call them the driver. Okay, so we have two different roles while we are pair programming. So one is the driver, is the person responsible to write the code. Okay, he has the hands on the keyboard, while the other guy, we call him the navigator. So basically, it's the person that is code reviewing the code that is being written. Okay, so obviously you probably start thinking, okay, so probably the guy that writes the code, that seems okay because that's normally what I usually do. But reviewing code throughout the day seems quite boring. Okay, it is. That's why, if you actually want to do effective pair programming, what we recommend is that you change roles between the driver and navigator multiple times a day. Okay, so let's say you write some code for an hour, then you change the role with your colleague, and then he writes some code, and so on and so forth. Let's say that by some reason I like to do some database tasks, so I want to be the driver on that one, and I have someone reviewing what I'm doing. And maybe my colleague wants to do some testing or some web service, so he's going to do that, and I'm going to be the navigator. So you don't have a golden rule when you should actually change roles, although it's highly recommended to change multiple times a day. Just make sure that we are all focused on what we are doing and we don't get jaded or bored. Okay? Actually, you can combine this very well with test-driven development. Let's say someone writes a test, the other person makes it pass, then the same person writes a test, the other person makes it pass. So the thing is, you don't have a golden rule on how you should change your roles the most important thing is that you actually change roles a couple of times a day. Okay, so rotate, change roles, change roles. Don't be afraid of that. Okay, got it till now? Okay, so who likes quizzes? Do you like quizzes? Okay, cool. So I brought you 4 different scenarios, and we are going to find out in which of them we have actually pair programming. Okay. So we have scenario A. We have scenario B. We have scenario C. And we have scenario D. Okay, so scenario A, who thinks they are pair programming? Have 2 guys, 2 computers. Yeah, you're right, obviously. They are not pair programming. Scenario B. Kind of, right? So,
they're intertwined.
at the beginning I said, okay, they are, but not bad, alright? I wouldn't like to see no one pair like that. Forget about it. We are just too close, that's it. Well, scenario C is quite similar to scenario A, although the guys are looking on the same computer, so do you think they are pairing? No. What about scenario D? Okay, so we have 2 guys working to the same workstation. Yeah, that's right, obviously. The only scenario where they're actually pairing is on scenario D. So if you're actually wondering, okay, so I want to pair program, how should I configure my workstation, how I can make this work, do you have some tips? Yes, I have. So I bring you like 4 possible setups. I don't know if there are more or not, but I think this is basically the most common ones, and I'm going to tell you my favorite one. So you just need basically monitor, a computer, a keyboard, that's it. So this is the first scenario that you can have. You can actually have 2 keyboards, okay, since 2 persons are going to write code anyway, so why not having 2 keyboards? And you can actually have 2 monitors as well. The thing that I would like to tell you is, if you're using 2 monitors, which is fine, because basically it's much more comfortable for you to look on the monitor, you should mirror them, okay? Don't use 2 monitors, one to look to the code and the other one to look to documentation. That doesn't work, okay? So what you see here, you should see there, to have effective pair programming. Having 2 keyboards or not, well, it really depends on the team. So I already knew teams that they like to have just 1 keyboard. So when they are changing the roles between the driver and the navigator, they pass the keyboard around. So it's like some sort of official change of role. Other guys, they simply want to have the keyboard in front of them because it's much more comfortable to just put your hands and type something without having the keyboard passing around. Well, so basically, when should you pair? Okay, so we want to do some pair programming. When should you pair? Does it depend on tasks? How can we actually figure out when we should pair or not? Well, from my perspective, every time you're in front of the workstation, okay? Basically, you should pair all the time. Obviously, you don't need to pair on meetings, okay? That doesn't make any sense at all. And you don't need to pair on the bathroom as well, okay? So, even though they seem quite close. So now, the trick. So this is the really important part. So besides changing the roles between the navigator and the driver, you can actually rotate both the pairs. Okay, so for example, let's say that we have 4 developers on our team. Okay, they are pair programming, so we have 2 work streams. So developer 1 and 2 is working on task A, and developer 3 and 4 are working on task B. This is, let's say, on the beginning of the week. Then, in the middle of the week, you change the pair, okay, so you rotate it. So as you can see, for instance, developer 1 stays on the task, while developer 2 left, and developer 3 joins that task, okay? And the same happens on task B. So we have someone giving continuity to the work, so it's going to give contact to the new person that arrives to the pair, while they have always a new joiner, okay? And this brings a lot of advantages that we are going to talk in a minute. Well, Rachel, I bet you already saw this.
That's all I have to.
Yes, it is. So this is from Rachel's book. This is a really useful tool, not to, let's say, be mandatory or to make someone rotate and pair with everyone else. This is basically to give visibility on the patterns and on the preferences of the people when they are rotating. So basically, whenever, let's say, Rose and Van pair, you simply mark it on this sort of ladder. So you have all the team members here, okay? And every time someone pairs, so a new pair gets formed, you mark it down. So you can actually see that Rose and Van paired more often than everybody else, and you have a couple of guys that never paired. So is this okay? This is actually an issue? No. We are just basically bringing visibility to what are the preferences and which person is pairing with the other person, okay? So this might be a really useful tool for you to understand if we are spreading knowledge and if everybody is working with everybody else, or if people seem to tend some preferences working with each other, okay? So what are the benefits of rotating? Why do we actually care with this? Well, first of all, collective code ownership. If you're not even pair programming at all, you have just one person writing some code, okay? And basically it's your code, right? Because you're doing that task, someone is doing a completely different task, so that's your piece of code, that's your class, that's your test. If you're pairing, at least you have two persons working on the same code, so you're spreading knowledge, and you have more people looking at the same code. And if you're actually rotating, then you are going to have at least 3 people. So you're going to have much more team members looking to the same stuff, so the sense of belonging is going to increase throughout the team. And you can actually have the knowledge spread equally, okay? So that basically brings us to the buzz factor. Does everybody know what the buzz factor is? Yes? Raise your hand if you know what the buzz factor is, okay? So basically the buzz factor is how many people a buzz would need to hit, this is quite hard by the way, in order for you to lose some knowledge. So for instance, if you only have a DBA and he's the only guy that works on the database, your buzz factor is 1, right? Because if that guy cannot come to work by some reason, you lose that knowledge, you cannot do anything about that. Rather, if you have like 4 members of your team and all the 4 can actually work on database, then that's fine. So your buzz factor is 4. So the bigger the buzz factor, the better. And pair programming helps you that because you have at least 2 guys working on the same stuff. So if someone goes on vacation, you always have someone working on that task. So it's really, really important. And last but not least, the beginner's mind. Well, beginner's mind is that state, that kind of thinking when I arrive to a new project, to a new task, and I don't know anything about it, so I don't have context, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions, right? Because I'm basically beginning. So the great advantage of beginner's mind is when I arrive to the pair, I'm going to ask a lot of questions, so I'm going to be put up to speed quite fast, and the person that has the context is going to teach me, and is going to rethink everything, and is going to explain me why we are doing the stuff the way we are. So it's quite beneficial to spread knowledge, to teach, to learn. So pair programming is going to enable you to actually have more engaged and more committed people. People tend to be on the zone for much longer. Remember, you're working with someone else. You're going to be much more efficient than working by yourself, right? Makes sense. Valuable stand-ups. So how many of you are doing Scrum here? Or Scrumish, kind of, or Scrum Bot, whatever you want to call it. Well, how many of you actually saw on a stand-up people just saying what they are doing, or they are talking to the Scrum Master, which doesn't make sense, right? Because it's not the Scrum Master that's doing the code, he doesn't care about that. Or people that are actually talking to the rest of the team, but the rest of the team doesn't care a lot as well because, okay, so it's your task anyway, so why should I care? I just want to know if it's done or not. Well, if you're pairing, people pay much more attention to what you're saying. And why? Let's say that you're on a Tuesday and you're telling what happened yesterday, that's sort of the whole questions. So everybody is going to try to understand exactly how you are working and why, because probably tomorrow they're going to jump into your task. So people are much more concerned on how stuff is going to be built, because sooner or later you're going to have your hands also on that code. So people actually do a lot of questions, and people tend to be much more in sync than when they are not pairing. This one is great too. So when you're not pairing, someone new arrives to the team. But what usually happens is, during the first week, he's going to have his workstation configured. After the second week, he's probably just going to look into some manual. And on the third week, he's going to look finally to code. And if you're lucky, in a month, he's going to code something for you. If you're pairing, you can almost start from day 1. Why? Because the new joiner can be the navigator, or he can be the driver because he has someone looking to his code and giving him directions. So the person that joins a pair is actually much more worth, so brings much more value than someone that joins a team when they are not pairing, okay? And that saves a lot of money. Limit the WIP, okay? So this is pure math. If you have like 6 developers, you have 6 work streams, okay? How many of you actually have so many stuff in progress that you actually did not deliver everything by the end of the sprint? At least I did. Yeah, because you have so much stuff in progress that some of the stuff get lost. But if you reduce everything by half, okay, if you have 6 developers, instead of 6 work streams, you actually have 3, you're going to have much more stuff complete, okay? You're going to have 2 people working on the task. It's going to be much faster, okay? And besides that, groomings, plannings, they are going to be much shorter, because you're not going to have so many tasks on the sprint anyway, so you're going to be much more efficient, and you reduce the complexity of managing so many tasks or handling so many tasks in the sprint. And what about code reviews, okay? So you're working on the team without pairing. Well, now and then, if you want to actually have some quality, you're going to have some code reviews. So if I'm pairing, do I need code reviews? Some teams don't actually do code reviews regardless. I don't think it's necessary, because if you're already code reviewing on the go while someone is typing the code, this to me is a little bit overkill. But let's say that you say, okay, but I want to have a code review for the whole department. Okay, so then it makes perfect sense in my opinion. But if it's just for the team, it's almost code reviewing twice, okay, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. And basically all of this is going to lead to less bugs. You already have a lot of studies that prove that teams that pair actually have less defects. Why? Because you're having 2 guys working on the same task, okay? If by some reason you are doing a mistake on your own, that mistake is probably going to production. If let's say that it passes through the test, okay, by some reason. If you're pairing, you have almost double the chance to detect defect early and fix it before going to live. It's more fun. It's fun to pair program, okay? People, it's almost like being in college when you're working with a colleague of yours. Okay, it's quite engaging. It's fun. You have less distractions. Okay, if you're pairing, you're not going to see all this stuff. So it's cool. You stay on the zone for much longer. You have less interruptions. Why? Let's say that you are in a team. Okay, if a manager, product owner, I don't know, even the scrum master needs to answer a question, and probably it's not that important. If he's going to ask a developer, that's quite fine. Okay, he's just stopping one work stream. But if you're talking to someone in a pair, you're actually stopping 2 people from getting the job done. Okay, so people tend to interrupt less in teams that actually pair. Less liking. That one is completely true. Let's say it's after lunch, you don't want to write that lousy task because you're actually just being lazy. Chances are your pair is going to push you to do the right thing, okay? So basically people pushes for the other, so writing tasks, comments is much more likely to be done when you're pairing. And finally, comfort zone wise, let's say you have 2 developers, each one has its own skill sets, okay? If they are working together, makes perfect sense, okay? Basically, each work stream has a bigger knowledge. So let's say, okay, so I'm a junior developer, I see a task that looks quite hard to be done. So if I'm working alone, I'm never going to take that task, okay? That doesn't make sense. I don't know how to do it. But if I'm pairing with someone that's quite senior, why not? So people actually have more courage, they are more brave to pick up tasks that if they were working by themselves, normally they wouldn't pick up. 2 heads actually think better than one, okay? You tend to have better ideas when you're discussing the problem with someone else. But, okay, so this, until now, I hope this sounds really, really nice, but you have at least 2 huge drawbacks that are really common habits that we usually see, okay? So this is music, okay, and over there you have Facebook and working, some kind of stuff, okay, so you have Facebook on one side or some distraction and some code on the other monitor. Forget about that, right? If you're pairing with somebody, you are not listening to music, right? Otherwise you cannot discuss with your colleague, doesn't make sense. So you don't listen to music. And you don't want to share your social life with your colleague as well, so you're not going to have Facebook. Doesn't make sense, okay? It's not an something that we are imposing, it's something that simply doesn't make sense. People tend not to use that sort of stuff. So all the distractions that you can actually find in your workplace, bye-bye, forget about them. Simply don't exist, which basically is going to make you much more efficient. And the idea that you have, okay, you're pairing, I'm losing velocity, not having that stuff is going to compensate a lot on the velocity that you lose. So now the question is, so is pair programming actually for everyone? No, it's not. Okay? Some people actually want to listen to music. You have the lonely wolves. You need to be social. You need to communicate. You need to get and receive, and give feedback. Okay? You're discussing with someone. You must be willing to accept that sometimes stuff will not be done the way you like because it's almost like a small community. Okay? So no, it's not for everyone. It's hard. It's quite beneficial, but Some people simply don't get it. And after all, you must actually be willing to try, because if you don't want to try pair programming, it simply is not going to work. Okay, that's why, in my perspective, it should never be imposed ever. I highly recommend it. So to be clear, so I think all the teams should pair program, regardless of the learning curve that you have ahead of you. But it's completely nonsense to actually make teams pair just for the sake of it. Okay? So a couple of questions that people usually do to me. So first of all, does remotely work? Okay, so we know that in a perfect world, we have all the teams on the same room working next to each other. That's obviously not possible. And remote works just fine. Okay, so I came from an environment where people use TeamViewer and Skype or Google Hangout, and people work fine. I bet you have at your company Jira or Rally, so you have all the stuff there. And even if you're just using a physical board, you can actually pick up the card from the board, show it on the webcam, and talk to the person on the other side and say, look, today we are going to do this, this, and that. So I think it works. It works fine remotely. Are exclamations effective? Well, if you're using story points, no. Right? Story point is always a story point, regardless if you're pairing or not. If you're actually working with days, then it changes, right? Because instead of estimating man days, you should estimate pair days. Okay? Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. So what about size or length of tasks? Do you think that if, for instance, the task is actually too small or that big, probably shouldn't pair? Well, from my previous experience, I would say pair all the time. Because if you're trying to decide every single task that you're going to start, if you should pair or not, you're probably going to spend more time deciding if you should pair or not than actually doing the stuff, okay? That basically becomes a waste, that sort of decision. So from my perspective, just keep stored somewhere else half of the workstations at your office and simply have one workstation per pair all the time, regardless of the length, the size, or the properties of the task. It shouldn't matter to do pair programming, okay? Is it expensive? Well, depends, okay? So you don't have one guy, you have two guys doing the same thing. Okay, that kind of seems like almost costs the double. But if by some reason you see that the technical debt actually is lower, you have less defects, probably your team is going to be much more engaged and having more fun, is that so much expensive or not? It's kind of a trade-off, to be honest, okay? So I'm going to say that I've heard a lot of successful cases doing pairing, but I never heard of a case where actually pairing was completely failed. So I think that's a really good indicator. Well, is it only for mature teams? If you're dressed like a Power Ranger when you go to work, well, then probably the pair programming is not the biggest of your problems. Otherwise, it's more than fine, okay? So you don't need to be an experienced team. You don't need to be a team for about 1 year or 2 years. You can actually start doing pair programming from day one. It's kind of something that's completely basic. It's just a decision that you as a team should decide. Okay, so we want to pair program, and actually we just start being a team for a week. It's completely fine, regardless of being mature or not. So don't grab to this excuse to say that you cannot do pair programming. Does it scale? Yes, it scales fine. I recall the Rachel example in her talk. So besides rotating the pair, you can actually rotate on different teams. So you can scale fine this concept, all right? On Rachel's company, they actually rotate in between companies, okay? So you can actually scale this even further. So it scales fine, you don't have any problems with pair programming. Companies that use it? Well, I brought just a few of them. So as you can see, some are huge, some are quite small, some are startups, some have been around for tons of years. So I'm betting that in some sort of way your company could fit here as well. So the excuse that usually people say that, oh yeah, but that in my company would never work. Really? No, Facebook does it. Why shouldn't your company do as well? And you have really tiny companies like 2 Degrees Network in the UK that they do it as well. So where is your company inside it? Probably it should be quite similar to one of those. Well, what about scholars and hands-on fan? Am I the only guy that is completely crazy and telling you that the way to go now is 2 guys working on the same task? No. Well, you have Kent Rack and Ron Jeffrey, so these guys, we don't need to introduce them. You have Alistair Cockburn, okay, so a well-known guy in the Agile community. Laurie Williams does a lot of investigation. I think everybody here knows Mitch Lacey. So he's a big fan of pair programming as well. I am, and hopefully you will be, or you are today. Well, and now just to close, how can you actually start? Okay, let's say that you're super engaged. Okay, pair programming is the best thing. It's the last Coke on the desert. How am I going to actually start? Well, you have basically two approaches. You can actually start slow. Do a pilot, grab a team, experiment, see how it goes, give it like 3, 4, 5 sprints, measure some results, see if you got better or not. Let's say that you actually think, okay, maybe a team is that too much. Well, just pair like 2 guys on the team where everybody just works on themselves and you have a pair, or just pair on Friday. I don't know. The thing is, what is the worst that actually can happen? Well, by the end of a couple of sprints, you say, right, pair programming is not for me, just go back to the original formula. No harm done, okay? Or you can actually go all in. Okay, just move. Just shift your company. Just say, okay, guys, let's go all for pair programming for 3, 4 sprints. And let's see how it goes. No harm done, right? So that's it. Thank you.
Questions? Questions to Pedro?
One question. So, usually we always see pair programming, but everyone knows that software is much more than just programming. Do you know, or do you have an example, for example, for pair testing?
No, I haven't. But that would be something really cool to see. Because in my perspective, it makes sense, right? Obviously, it depends on the test. Or even, it actually doesn't depend on the test. Even if you're just functional testing, if you're pairing with someone else, it makes sense. Let's say that you forget to some check on the checklist, so that would make some sense as well. And if you're testing, let's say, writing cucumber tests, that makes perfect sense, so why not? Yeah. I think so, yeah, it makes sense. I never heard of an example like that, but probably if you Google it, you'll find some. Makes sense. Yeah.
Do you think pair programming works with multifunctional teams?
It's hard. If you have full stack developers, it's easy, all right? So you don't distinguish between front-end and back-end developers. If you actually have to distinguish between front-end and back-end, I would recommend to just have back-enders and just front-enders, for instance. Okay, that probably is going to make more sense. Because the very nature of pair programming is someone is coding and the other guy that is just watching understands what's happening and has some critical judgment on that. So if I'm a front-end, I just understand JavaScript and you're writing some Java code, I'm probably not going to contribute a lot. So people should have the same sort of skills or craft. Okay, so it makes more sense if you're a full-stack developer. Or if you actually have okay, so I have 4 front-enders, probably we can join 2 front-enders and 2 front-enders. But in my perspective, the way to go is have full-stack developers that actually work on the back end and on the front end.
I'm trying to imagine a guy programming, the other guy watching. It doesn't happen like programmers have their own way of programming, the personality, you know, and programming, the other guy says, no, don't do it like that, do it like this. Does this happen? And the guy goes, no, this is my way of doing it.
Yeah, it happens a lot. So, is that, do you want to finish the question? No, exactly. So, we have really different personalities, okay? So, obviously, if you want to pair program to succeed, first of all, you must be humble, okay? Because you're not working by yourself, so this kind of, you must reach some sort of agreement, right? And besides working in a pair, since you have the rotation, this sort of agreement should actually come from the team, okay? So you should have some coding standards and do some stuff exactly like the team agrees on, all right? And so you need to be very social, you need to communicate, and you need to be willing to give and to receive feedback. So obviously if you're kind of that sort of guy that said, okay, so I want to work on my own, I want to have all my ideas implemented, then you're going to fail miserably in pairing. But if you're actually willing to say, okay, so fair enough, sometimes I'm going to win, and my idea is going to be implemented. Some other times, the other guy idea is going to be implemented. It's kind of a game of give and take, right? So
that's not for everybody. So.
Yeah, exactly. So you must be on the right mindset to actually give it a go. So So you're not working on your own.
One more question, last one. Okay, thank you, Pedro.